So this session is what I call WWCD, or what was recorded. The idea being how to extend WordPress in a way that's classy, in a way that's consistent. So the quick introduction to who I am, who's Joker on the stages. I run a company called 10up. We are now we have 12 full-time employees and a network of contractors, and we work with some very large clients, many of which are in the New York area, just a few of which we've highlighted up here. We contribute and donate time back to WordPress core. Ellen, who's actually right up next, works with us, and she's a big core contributor. We maintain a lot of plugins. We like to think that most of our plugins adhere to our ideas for UI and user experience. Some popular ones are some simple page ordering, simple local avatars. We'll talk about some of the plugins we've developed. I also write and do some expert reviewing for Smash Magazine when I have time. Not all at all. So this is the idea, right? In my mind, everybody might have their own opinion, but in my mind, WordPress core, when you install it, is kind of like a base on a stick, right? It's accessible to a very broad audience, right? It's easy for anybody to get in this car and be comfortable. It's very economical. It's efficient. Does well on fuel. And very popular. A lot of people like this car. It's simple, it's clean, it's economical, it's accessible, right? It's sort of a great product to just pull out of the bag. And one of the things like WordPress is it's also sort of known, and Honda's known for being very modular, right? You can do all sorts of things with custom parts, custom add-ons. So here's the premise of the talk, right? This is WordPress after a lot of plugins to it, right? This is somewhere under here, I think, is a Honda Civic, an older model. And the idea, and I think this person probably believes that their car goes faster, right? Their mission was to make their car go faster, or make WordPress have more HTML5, right? And they installed something, they added all these parts that did that. But I'm not so sure that when we step back and look at the result, even if it meets the technical requirements they were looking for, that we're very happy with it. Although I've met a few people that might like this. So let's take this a step further. This is my experience when I work with a customer that has dozens of plugins. I think it's awesome, and they've added plugins that do everything in the world, custom cables everywhere. I open this thing up and it's like a new menu bar experience, and then like the admin doesn't even look the same. I look at it, I probably wouldn't have known if it was WordPress. If they had plugins, it's unrecognizable to me. So the car thing is too much fun. Just have a little bit more fun with this. For a second here, this is what I think, talking to my friends like Drupal developers. What you think it is when you do, it's too easy to have fun with these. That's okay, this is what we think Drupal is. It's a great platform, right? You can build anything else. It just doesn't do too much when you actually pick it up. Where do I sit? How do I use it? So this is the concept, right? So this is what we think WordPress should look like, right? It's great that we can extend it, it's great we can mod it, it's great we can do cool things with it. We should be trying to do so in a way, we should be trying to use plugins and build plugins with developers in a way that makes it feel like this didn't come from some ungodly garage in the middle of nowhere, but came from a group of people that build with a consistent idea of what this thing looks like, what this thing should feel like. That go for some sort of consistency. You look at this and it still looks elegant. Maybe it goes faster. I don't even know what this variation does. It goes faster, it has a different kind of design to it, has different styling, but it doesn't feel like some sort of weird hybrid of different experiences and different parts that don't go together. So here's the point. This isn't a talk about plugin code that sucks. It's not a talk about plugins that are useless and don't do anything. There are plenty of those. I can do a whole talk on bad plugin code, bad plugin writing practices. That's not the point of this talk. The point of this talk is, it's not that our plugins are badly written. It's not that our plugins don't do great things. It's that they stick out when you install them in WordPress and you use them like sort of dozens. So here's an example of this, right? So here's the WordPress small screenshot from the WordPress page editor. Looks pretty consistent to me with the category editor in WordPress. Here's the post editor, still feels like the same product for me. And then you install something like a plugin I used to use all the time called PageMash, and it's not a well-written plugin. It's not that it doesn't work well. is that you install it and you have these new icons, these new color schemes, new conventions, a name, and it just doesn't fit in with the rest. So why do consumers, what I mean by consumers, why do general users love WordPress? Why, in my opinion, has WordPress become such a popular platform? So it's simple for writers to understand. So I think the consistent theme of all these bullets is going to be that it's simple, it's elegant, it's approachable. So as a tool built for publishers, a powerful tool for developers, but a tool built for writers, a tool built for publishers, it's easy to understand, it's approachable, you're not overloaded with options. And when something is consistent and something uses the same UI conventions and the same design conventions, it makes it approachable and intuitive as a product. It's pretty. To me, it's actually saying the same thing. People like to use products that there's a science behind why we think something looks pretty, and a lot of that has to do with something looking consistent, looking uniform, looking elegant. We like to work with things. We like to interact with things, even if you don't like to admit it, that look nice and feel nice to interact with. That's basically the premise. There's maybe one more bullet, but I actually think this bullet's the same as the other two. The other reason a lot of publishers, a lot of small businesses, and a lot of writers will like it is because it's affordable. A large part of the reason it's affordable is not about how much it costs to develop one, it's about how easy it is in terms of those long-term costs that people can use it. You don't have massive support costs when you use it because it's an intuitive product, because it's an approachable product, and well-supported. So here's the idea. Many of our extensions that we're building that do really critical things that WordPress should be able to do are ruining this experience. They're taking something that's elegant, simple, pretty, nice to use, and they're making it jarring, confusing, and taking it and adding complexity. And that's the experience a lot of people that don't just install it, use it out of the box. That's how they know WordPress. So at TEDUp we have a philosophy and sort of a mission about how we build things that we'd like to see other developers and other shops take on. The overriding philosophy here is WWCD, what would core do? Can you tell where, when a client who's never seen WordPress before picks this up and uses the software, is it obvious when they look at the tool where WordPress stops and where something that was clearly bolted on begins? Going back to that car, you can tell that spoiler, right? Clearly somebody else tacked that onto the car. A lot of the plugins, you can often tell, okay, this is the cool product, this is where somebody stuck something on, right? Somebody dropped something on top of it. We think if a client can open it up and tell, like, this piece doesn't fit, this feels much more awkward than the rest, we've done our job wrong as a developer. So the second piece of this is we ask ourselves, when we need to build a custom piece of functionality, or we need to write some complex module, we don't ask ourselves, well, what's the cheapest, sloppiest way we can do this to meet the requirements, right? We ask ourselves, if we were tasked by the core team, if we were responsible for adding that feature to WordPress core, the software that everybody uses, from scalability, from security perspective, from usability perspective, how would they approach it? And that's our standard, that's our bar for how we approach it. And we think more people should do this. And I know that there are developers out there that have made sloppy plugins that if they were held to the bar of people on the core team looking at their code, having to submit it as a core patch, they wouldn't approach it the way they did. They would put more effort into it. They would think harder about how it should look, how it should feel, how it should integrate. So here's mostly an example of the right way to do this. So Kismet, I think, is a good example, right? So I don't know about you, but when I go to the comments panel and I go to look at spam and manage my spam, flag things as spam, trash things as spam, I don't even think about the fact that Kismet isn't just part of WordPress core. It ships with it, but it's actually a plugin. It's actually a plugin that uses WordPress's normal API to add functionality, but it feels so natural when you're using it in the comments panel that you don't even process the idea. You don't even think about the idea that you're using something added on. It feels like it's part of the core tool. So here's the wrong way to do it. And plenty I could pick on. I like to pick on a plugin called CForms 2 that's out there that gives you the ability to build custom forms, generate custom forms. This is my opinion. Again, I'm not saying it's badly written. I'm not saying it doesn't do something important, but let's take a look at some of the things that I look at when I open up SQL. So the first thing I noticed is that there's these weird color conventions, color palettes that don't appear anywhere else, right? It looks like a designer looked at this and never thought about being part of a larger whole. It just sort of said, well, here's the micro things and this plugin. So then there's this, how do you get to the forms you want to edit, right? We know that we have conventions elsewhere in WordPress for listing of objects that we want to edit, a screen that lists posts, that lists pages, lists things we want to get to. They instead have gone with the convention that is a drop down at the top of the page where you choose. That convention, if you're a user, you're picking objects and editing objects in WordPress, you're not going to think to go find a drop down. You don't on the page screen have a drop down at the top saying choose which page you want to edit. You go back to the object list. And there's these icon conventions above the columns, right? So we have plenty of tables in WordPress, the posts table, the links table, plenty of tables everywhere, the category editor, plenty of tables everywhere that have a convention, but this is what's even a class for those developers, right? The WP list class, or list table. And they have titles and have very distinct style, but instead on here, we decide they adopt these icons, this iconography that you don't see anywhere else in WordPress and have to adjust to whether they're intuitive, I think arguable, whether these icons are intuitive to the table, but they don't fit in. So this is my favorite part, which is that they decided to put the editing buttons and the saving and refreshing buttons for the plugin in the admin menu bar. I don't really know where to start with this one, but I'm going to go look in the menu bar where I have things like manage my site, add new content. I'm going to go look up there for the save button for the screen that I'm currently editing. There is actually a save button, the primary button convention in WordPress at the bottom of the thing we're editing, so you can click save, but someone decided to do better in the admin menu bar centered with everything. So then, and this is a common one I see, right? So we've added, which is an easy thing to do. So they've added their menu with a name that doesn't really, just the name of the plugin, where I think it should probably be something like forms below everything else. I say call it what the object is, not what the name of your plugin is. If you're going to add content, you're going to edit on the screen. And why not put it up with the other kind of objects, like comments, pages, links, put it where the other kind of similar objects are. And then there's the help menu item, right? Now, there's a convention in WordPress. If you need to get help on a page that you're on, there's a little tab that they don't have on their page, a little help set tab you can pull down from the top and they're on page post. We don't go into the pages menu and see a help icon. Not every menu in WordPress, and imagine if you did that, right? Every menu we open up, there's a help button at the bottom, right? Probably pretty cluttered, pretty fast, but they decided the way to go is to add a help menu inside the object editing menu instead of in line as a pull down like it is everywhere else. So, the case study I'm going to talk about, it's easier to talk about some of your own stuff. So I built a plugin that we're going to talk about a little bit called Simple Local Avatars. Why did I build this plugin? Because I wanted to, there were times where, like for a company website, where I didn't want to actually rely on the avatar, where company owners and business owners wanted to be able to specify specific local avatars for their site. So then the first question is that I asked myself when I needed this feature is there another plugin that does this, right? There's got to be something that's built, a plugin that just lets me upload a local avatar. And indeed there were, but when I went out there to find a plugin that did this on the UI, I found that they did, on top of just letting me add a local avatar, I had to have a whole new admin page. I had to configure Twitter integration. I had to configure Facebook integration. I had to do everything in the world, 2 admin screens full of settings, just to get please just give me a browse, choose a file. This is the avatar one, right? There was no plugin that did that anymore. They were all, so this is one that I looked at that seemed to be pretty popular, called Add Local Avatar. That was the alternative. And so the first thing I noticed is they actually have a completely new user screen underneath this. We have a users list, right? You go to users, you have a list of users at your site that you can edit, that have columns, that have choices. They've added a whole new screen to list your users with mostly redundant information. Different conventions for on the right side, choosing actions instead of below the title. A really different experience. I didn't understand why I needed to explain to my client why they need to go to, I have 2 user list screens where they perform different actions. And then you go to the settings panel for comments, and there's like 15 or 20 new settings options. I mean, how many things do I really need to configure and worry about as a user to just upload a local avatar? So they asked me one of the options is what path do you want to upload it in? Does any user, thinking about like how WordPress works, any user, once you've configured like your general media or on the cloud, does any user really care what path it goes to? Maybe a developer can use a hook to change this. Does any user care about this? Or even want to think about that? There's a specify the size of your avatar option, which last I checked, you get avatar function in the theme, but actually asks you what size is the avatar you want. So there's an avatar in posts option to automatically inject the avatar into the post. Now, this is actually a good example because this is not a bad idea, right? I actually get asked about my plugin now and then. I'm not a developer. I want to have these local avatars I'm loading inside the post content, right? It's not that it's a bad idea. It's that it doesn't belong in this plugin, right? There's another great, in my opinion, simple plugin that could just be called something like add avatar in post that does one thing well, which is it takes the avatar, whatever gets uploaded and added, and puts it into post. It just doesn't belong in a simple plugin that's just about uploading your avatar. And then there's the infamous, and I'll bet you, probably most of us in this room, including me way back when I've done this, is the infamous, please give me a credit on your front end option. My view, I personally think like the next version of WordPress, every core developer should get to have this option. And every feature in WordPress core that they've added, they should get a little, I'd like a credit please button, right? So, yes, you can get in the plugins panel, it'll give you a link to who you are, you can get your name there, you can put it in your little help drop down, come see me for more support. Stop putting things in your plugin that inject credits into your plugin in the front end that ask people. Nobody wants to turn this option on, right? If you want them to support you, ask them for a donation, right? There's other ways in your admin panel you can ask them for credit. Ask them if you really want to, ask them if you really want my plugin, write a post about it, or put a plugins credit screen on your site somewhere. Stop asking to do that. For goodness sakes, worse than not asking, don't just inject credit on the front end. Everybody did that. Well, then you got another CMS. So enough of the credits. So here's how I approach simple local avatars when I got fed up and said these all, no, don't pass my local core to test. All right, so here's the number of new admin screens that I added for you to manage your settings. 0. No new admin screens. No new screens to go into, settings to configure, and options to set up. None are necessary. And I sometimes think developers add them just because they can. These screens, oh hey, look, I don't have an admin screen, right? It's kind of like I can add that loose adding feature. I think they're usually not necessary. Now, you do sometimes legitimately need to add local fields, right? You do sometimes need to add some level of configuration in WordPress. So I do have, so I thought it was sort of a reasonable popular request, but also a potential security issue. I added one field to the existing comments screen, which we'll talk about, you can look into the existing settings screen, that asks them whether they want users that don't have file upload capabilities in WordPress to be able to upload an avatar anyways. Because a lot of clients wanted their employees or their writers who weren't administrators, who weren't editors, to be able to go ahead and upload their own avatar. But I didn't want to turn that on by default because it seemed like working around WordPress's inherent capabilities. So I added one setting field. Number of new user profile fields. 1, not 4 more, 5 more options. What's your Twitter handle? What's your Facebook handle? How many places you'd like to find avatars? One new field called upload avatar, where you can click browse, choose your avatar, and just upload it. And then if it isn't uploaded, a little delete checkbox, which actually it was pointed out to me that I probably deviate a little bit from how core would do it here. This is probably going to be replaced with just a link that says delete local avatar with Ajax, all that. So see, I break the rules too, but I admit it. It's a confessional. And the value which just works priceless. So the idea here being, for a user, there's nothing like, what they don't want is, I install your plugin, how many things do I have to configure, how many screens I have to go, they want to just turn it on, they want to use it, and they want it to just work without the frustrating banging the mouse, looking for help, looking for support. Like WordPress does, like Core tries to do. So, the important corollary to this is I picked on plugins a lot, but it's not like any stretch of the imagination just drop with plugins. So this is a plugin, this is a theme called Weaver. All right, again, not saying it's a badly written theme, not saying this theme doesn't have some neat ideas, but maybe they could approach their configuration a little bit different. I think this theme's configuration panel, I didn't count them, I actually think it has more configuration choices than all of WordPress when you install it. In fact, I'm pretty sure of that. I think just the screen, just the main options panel has more setting choices than all of WordPress. All right, so you go into, here's the option screen. And no, we're not even in advanced options, right? We're on the main options screen. And in main options, I have 6 more sub-tabs. So I don't know, I can't think of any other place off the top of my head in WordPress that we have tabs that look like this with this weird blue highlight italic style, or even have this notion of like stacked tabs to edit content, like multi-dimensional options panels. Again, with the please thank me, please do everything you can to reward me for writing a plugin, credits, donate buttons, just get rid of them, all right? Again, there's an option, they'll see it in the plugin panel when they install, they'll know who you are, trust me, if they want to make a donation, they will. Only thing that putting that button up there is going to do is make them less likely to want to use your plugin. And then we have these sort of like crazy fonts that don't appear anywhere else, next to select button styles that don't appear anywhere else. Some sort of heading 5 or heading 6 that I think they had to make up a style because it just doesn't exist that many layers. And then we have like enter your X number. There's no like click this and you get like a color wheel, it's just put in the X value, which every user that installs the theme wants to do. And then, this is my favorite, you think you're done, right? You've gone through the theme options panel and can use it. So this appeared on every single post that you add. You go to the post editor, adds a Weaver options for this page panel, which again, I think this might actually be more options than all the WordPress settings panels put together by default. That's what the user's going to think of this. But I'm going to think, oh, cool. Every single post I write, I can configure 50 different things, right? They're going to look at this and they're like, I'm done with this. I'm done with this theme. I'm on to the next thing. So, some best practices. So, for starters, in terms of like how you build a settings panel when you have to, how do you add settings screen? The question isn't even so much what would core do. We have an easier question, right? What does core do, right? It's not that hard if you're trying to build something consistent to look at what somebody else has already done. We'll talk about other techniques to find these styles, but I'm sure every developer in this room has used an inspector, be it Firebug, be it Chrome Inspector, Safari Inspector, whatever the case may be. Open it up, look at what the class is, look at how they structure the HTML in their pages to use write the HTML. Look at the classes, there's classes everywhere, right? Large text, medium text, input boxes for different sizes. There are styles everywhere WordPress is having, they're very consistently used. Think about your settings. Don't just because it pops into your mind as a developer that, oh, somebody might want to change this, doesn't mean it needs to be something that you immediately make an options panel for, right? Does it need to be a top-level menu? So this is the role manager plugin. Again, well-written plugin does something very important a lot of users want to do. I think there is a lot of room to improve the UI in this plugin. Does restrictions and roles need to be new top-level menu items? Or can it maybe be put under the user's menu, where you're managing users and user options? Does it need an entirely new page, right? Like the local app question, I didn't need to build a whole new settings page just for one option or 2 options. If it's clearly part of your reading settings, or your writing settings, right, your discussion settings, can you go on an existing page, an existing place in WordPress? Think of things like drop-downs versus radio buttons. If you only have 2 or 3 choices that are always those 2 or 3 choices, should it be a drop-down every time, or do you have a radio button for choosing your option? Do you really need any settings, right? Do you actually need to give them all different choices, or does your plugin do something pretty simple that they can just install it and it just works? You need to, just because you're making a plugin that does something cool or something complex doesn't mean it needs to have settings. So, another best practice, this is what I mean with that, stop advertising to us as a plugin developer. So again, a really great plugin, W3 Total Cache, a lot of people use, but he insists on that we need to read his news and everything that he's doing in our dashboard panel. This is actually one of my largest pet peeves. The people that you feel like they need to add all sorts of news feeds and marketing material into your dashboard, right? That's an immediate turn off to a plugin. My clients, my own sites, I don't need to read your news. They don't need to read your news every time they log in. Less is more, right? So this is the paradox of choice, and this is very much a core WordPress philosophy, right? Which is making decisions about, by default, for users, right? Making decisions about this is what 95% of the users want to do. Certain other large brands are infamous for this, but successful with it, right? Making decisions about the most common, most popular use case instead of loading people up with choices is preferable, right? Making decisions for your users that simplify their app getting set up instead of asking them a million different setup questions is a preferred way to go. Paradox of choice, right? So when you walk into like the grocery store and you have 500 cereals, right? Do people want that? Well, we have it. I guess there's some demand for it. There's something to be said for keeping things simple. So some tools point us in the right direction. So there is a UI style guide at this URL that walks through different how WordPress as a UI is configured. Standards for things like the fonts that are used everywhere, styling of different headers, icon sizes, icon styling. It's a good resource to look at when you're thinking about either like drafting a plugin or doing a prototype or mocking up storyboards. It's a good resource to go to for guidelines. Coding techniques. So a lot of people, whenever you want to think about our settings API, you have a settings API, right? You don't have to create a new screen. You don't have to code in all the fields. If you're not familiar with the settings API, that's the URL. You should look it up. There are add settings field and add settings section functions and methods that let you tap into existing settings screens and add new fields, either to existing sections, or you can add your own sections like a discussion page and add as many fields as you want. You don't need to add a whole new settings screen as configuration choices. There is an API for it. If you're not familiar with it, you should be. It'll also save you writing a lot of HTML in case like the settings screen layout changes from like tables to divs. You don't have to worry about recoding. You're going through their API. There's a screen API that was introduced in WordPress 3.3 that you should know about. This is an example from Andrew Mason of how to use the screen API to add custom help options, custom help tabs with a little help drop down the top. So if you think your users need more explanation or need more detail or need more help, instead of adding a whole new page for it, instead of loading up your settings screen with help, use the existing API to add new information to that little help drop down. It comes from the top of the screen. You can add it to click the new settings pages you add. You can add more help tabs to existing settings pages. You can add more configuration choices like a discussion or readings page. You can add more help in there for your users. So add posts. So like Core does, where you think there's a place, if there's an edge case where somebody will want to configure something or want to change the way your plugin works by default, WordPress does not have an option for everything you can filter and invoke. It has in code filters and hooks that look like do action and apply filters. But like Core, put these in your plugins. If you will have like an edge case where 5% of your users or developers pick up your plugin, you might want to change where the uploads are stored, like the avatar plugin. You might want to add some additional functionality, some additional fields or choices. Let them hook in using the do action and apply filters, which are, of course, the other side of add action and add filter. Right? Add filters, add hooks in your plugin so other developers, instead of forking your plugin, or instead of just getting overwhelmed by the options in your plugin and their themes and their own plugins, can override and add new functionality to your plugins. Finally, clean up after yourself. The joke here is, right, like a party, you throw this awesome party, and then everybody leaves, and you realize that they haven't really left. There's still this mess that they've left behind to clean up, which no one likes, right? So there are uninstall hooks, uninstall methods in WordPress. When you remove your theme, you can make sure that somebody fully uninstalls it, not deactivates it, but fully removes it, that you can completely clean up after yourself. Remove those tables you added, remove those options that you saved in the option menu. Remove files that you put in there. Clean up after yourself. as a plugin. So when somebody wants to remove it, wants to stop using it, it doesn't leave lingering traces everywhere. And that's what we're doing. Yeah. Questions? Plugins you'd like to make fun of? All right.
What plugins at your company as
Collectively, our team has developed, not all of them are the company's plugins, but our team has probably developed, I'd say, somewhere between 20 and 25, I'd say in that realm. Company plugins probably around 16 or so. We do a lot of plugin development. We try to, we sort of, I'd say the intention of our philosophy is when we build something for a client that we feel like adds a lot of reuse, adds a lot of value to the community, we try to remember and try to remind the client that you're benefiting immensely from the fact that you're using this license-free software you're going to pay a nickel for. The least you can do is share something back with the community, give something back, let them benefit from your use case of it. That to me is kind of like the civic deal, right? With WordPress. If you're going to use it, you're going to be a part of this community, you're going to extend it, exchange for getting something, for free, open source, give something back to do something interesting.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know, almost did like themes, or is it another way to do
Oh, themes, yes, themes.
Well, it's what it's not.
Right.
Is there ever going to be a time when you think that WordPress will be more selective about what they allow to be loaded on WordPress.org as plugin for platform that in order to everything you say?
Curate the.
Yeah, basically.
Might be other people in this room that could actually answer this better than I could. I can tell you that what comes to my mind is the reason there is not, I think, is twofold. I think the biggest reason is, do you want to volunteer to do it? Right? The biggest problem that we have is, and we try to be a part of the solution, right, not a part of the problem. In fact, the biggest problem in the community is never hear somebody complain about why doesn't WordPress, this free thing that I never give a nickel to, and donated an hour of time to, why doesn't it do X? Just because there's nobody, they don't have the resources. I mean, the rate plugins get updated come out in WordPress, I don't think there's the resources to curate really code review. I also don't personally know that that's, I mean, make the case once again on WordPress.org versus elsewhere. I don't know that it's actually, my suspicion is that if that was introduced, that there would be as many people on the opposite side of that argument, there'd be backlash. People that have plugins up there that probably shouldn't be up there, that are suddenly being taken down, Maybe else than
Yeah, I can answer. So we do have a set of guidelines, and there's a bit of review that happens when a plugin is submitted, and a lot of plugins will get sort of rejected at first because say that images they're admin and they're loading it from a remote site, so that site can see every time you access their admin window like that for privacy reasons. So we'll kick those back. We're not doing like Apple style review of every code we get or every update that we make. What we are trying to do is, like Jake said, it's a scale issue. We're trying to find ways of having review at scale. And so those are automated. We want code focused on patterns, and then just email it out there. We have to do that with security things. And then the other thing we have to scale is having users report something.
Something to the idea that the good stuff rises and people choose to use it, some of the less good stuff just gets poorly reviewed. You hope there's some community of that, especially in our community.
So if there's one of the plugins that you put the plugin repository, make most popular
The ones that are jumping to mind, I don't have a prepared answer. I use, and actually stop to think about whether or not these are useful plugins are actually good UI. I tend to like plugins that personally adapt for developers, right? Right. I don't really like plugins that don't use many plugins that are built for, sort of users with lots of different options. I use like multiple post thumbnails plugin a lot because it's again sort of meant for a developer to be able to add those additional thumbnail options. Let's see. Trying to think of other ones I use frequently. A lot of the sites that we build, we're either building on a platform like WordPress.com yet here you don't have traditional plugins, or we just, because I think we're not paying a lot of the plugins out there, we tend to build a lot of stuff custom. I don't know what other ones we use. Yeah, I can't even think of any ones. I know I use multi-post thumbnails a lot. We tend to, again, I think a lot of our own plugins that come out of our own need to use them.
Do you guys have like a platform theme that you try to design?
No, we pretty much, sometimes we'll share themes on our own platforms. We try to do almost all of our themes custom. So some of us have like individual skeletons that we've adapted, or HTML, CSS skeletons that varies from developer to developer within our team. But I'm not personally a big fan of building on top of other frameworks. I sort of see, I'm not consulting any frameworks developers or in the room, but I prefer to write directly to WordPress, right? I don't really like a layer between. I feel like WordPress is an API, and it's flexible and robust enough that you don't need a layer between your theme and what WordPress does. Those often just add sort of inefficiencies and another layer of code to run and fail point. Short answer is no. Questions? All right, cool. Thanks, everyone.